After Vice President Kamala Harris exposed and humiliated him during their interview on live TV, Fox propagandist Bret Baier sheepishly admitted that he did make a mistake that the vice president was correct to call him out on. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, as you know, Vice President Kamala Harris was recently interviewed by Bret Baier of the Fox Propaganda Network, and the moment that went the most viral was this one here. Going to play it to refresh your memory, and then we'll get to the better part, which is where Bret Baier sheepishly admits that he did indeed screw up.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Bret, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you...
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what...
Yes, that's 100% correct. Of course, Donald Trump is an authoritarian and a fascist that Fox is desperate to whitewash, I should say, sanitize and launder the variously unhinged things that he's said over his career. However, recently on Fox, I think it was the next day, Bret Baier did admit that he made a mistake with regards to that clip. And I think it's worth watching, seeing him sheepishly, damn it, actually, yeah, I kind of screwed up there.
Harold, I did make a mistake, and I want to say that mistake. When I called for a soundbite, I was expecting a piece of the enemy from within, from Maria Bartiromo's interview, to be tied to the piece from your town hall, Harris, where you asked the former president about the enemy from within. It just had the piece about the town hall, and just take a listen to what I meant to roll.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
My point was that we asked him the question about that sentence and what he was trying to mean.
Yeah, except that really wasn't a coherent response by Donald Trump. He made the threat and then denied making the threat. In any other circumstance, if a Democrat did that, Fox would point that out. Well, you can say you didn't make a threat, but you did make a threat. And, it's like the lengths to which Fox will go to sanitize and launder Trump's depredations, it really is staggering. It makes sense that they had to pay nearly $800 million in that defamation settlement against Dominion voting systems. But again, Bret Baier felt obviously that the viral dunk that the vice president made against him was sufficient, that he felt the need to actually say, you know what, I did screw up. It was, that was a selectively edited clip. It should have included, what Donald Trump originally said. And that sort of that sort of public concession, I still think is something worth noting, that as partisan as Fox is, as bad faith as Fox is, Bret Baier knows he was humiliated so badly that he felt the need to recognize it. Now, with respect to the interview, I should also note that Vice President Harris got 7.1 million viewers during her interview on Fox. But when Donald Trump had a town hall earlier on Fox the same day, he only netted 3 million viewers, so less than half. The other thing I want to point out, just while we're picking on Bret Baier, as well we should, because I think that's a worthwhile enterprise, Brian Stelter of CNN, he was also making the case in the run up to the Bret Baier Kamala Harris interview that, again, Bret Baier, despite having the veneer of respectable journalism, is actually quite partisan, and he knows where his bread is buttered. He knows the Fox viewers are by and large MAGA Republicans and that they're deferential to Trump, and he doesn't want to do, he doesn't want to act in such a way as to drive them away. He wants to, have the appearance, have the veneer of somebody who is a tough, respectable journalist. So he will occasionally ask Donald Trump tough questions, and you'll note that Donald Trump has steered clear of Bret Baier for about a year, whereas Vice President Harris walked into the lion's den. Now, having said that, Brian Stelter put together a juxtaposition of the first question Bret Baier asked Donald Trump during their most recent interview, which, again, I think it was more than a year ago, and the first question that Bret Baier had for the vice president. And note the contrast.
You can tell a lot about an interview based on the first question that's asked. So watch Bret Baier ask Trump a first question last year, and then watch his first question to Harris.
Mr. President, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
I've asked this question, the same first question, to all the candidates I've interviewed this year, and that is this. What do you think is the most important issue facing the country right now? Madam Vice President, thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Brett.
Voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
What a striking difference. With Trump, he warmed up his subject, tried to make Trump comfortable. With Harris, he went for the jugular right away. We looked at the transcripts of both interviews and found that he also interrupted Harris a lot more often. This, of course, reflects what the Fox audience wanted to see. They wanted to see Harris squirm in her seat. Now, to be fair, Baier also pressed Trump, challenged Trump about his classified documents mishandling. So both interviews were probing, but in very different ways. And with Harris, one of the big takeaways is that she sat there and was interrupted over and over again. Some people think she was mansplained. Of course, others think she was filibustering and avoiding Baier's questions.
So again, I think the contrast is pretty staggering. Again, I want to be very clear because I played this clip before. Baier did press Trump repeatedly, just not nearly as often as he pressed Harris, and he interrupted Trump far less than he interrupted Harris. There was a clear asymmetry in terms of the pressure that Baier was seeking to apply right out the gate. Now, again, as far as the filibuster thing is concerned, there's no doubt that the vice president struggled to answer some of the questions because the answers were just by definition so difficult. I mean, what are you supposed to say to someone who says, hey, listen, these people, X, Y, and Z, died on your watch. Do you want to apologize? I don't know how I would answer a question like that because the premise is just so hostile right out the gate. I mean, again, imagine you could flip that on Trump. Be like, Brett, would you ever ask Trump to apologize for the women who died as a consequence of restrictive trigger abortion laws that have been passed because his Supreme Court justices overturned Roe v. Wade, which is what he intended them to do in the first place? Would you ever just accept the premise that there's a moral culpability there? Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If Vice President Harris is somehow responsible for those deaths, then by definition, Trump must be responsible for other deaths as well. But the application of that standard is only ever one-sided. Having said that, though, she did pretty damn well when you consider who Bret Baier is, how hostile Fox is, and the stakes. The vice president, was disciplined in her responses. She made a point to go back to Trump to create the contrast between her and Trump, which is really what this is about. It's a binary choice. And then she exposed Bret Baier on air so badly that Bret Baier felt the need the next day to address it on his own show, apropos of nothing. That's a victory if I can imagine one. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.